Here's something interesting. Last week, I told you about Republican governor from Ohio, Mike DeWine, who essentially abandoned Donald Trump when it comes to dealing with coronavirus. Mike DeWine took coronavirus seriously from quite early on, one of the earlier governors to really take action. And he has seen his approval skyrocket thanks to not following the Trump doctrine and following the sort of sensible governor doctrine on coronavirus. We've now learned that Republican Congressman Peter King from New York, who I am no big fan of, is going to be ignoring the Republican Party and voting for a Democratic coronavirus relief package that's expected to be voted on later today. If it may already have been voted on by the time you listen to today's show. Now, I have mixed feelings about this in the sense that it is once again, it's a Republican who's personally affected by something and now is behaving rationally and doing the right empathetic thing. I wish it didn't take that to get them to behave appropriately. And what I mean by that is Peter King is a New York congressman. He represents one of the hardest hit areas by the virus. It's New York's second congressional district. This is the South Shore of Long Island. So it's not the absolute epicenter of New York City's 5 boroughs, but it's as close as you can be. It's just, the New York City metro area without actually being there. And that's why he's going to vote in favor of this package. Republicans have been talking more and more about what if we maybe limit relief to blue states. They've been hesitant to do more relief and a second stimulus. But Peter King can't get away with that. His district has been absolutely crushed. So there are some who are framing this as hero Peter King abandons his party and does the right thing. Well, it's more like Peter King abandons his party on this one bill because it would be political suicide for him personally not to, since he represents one of the hardest hit congressional districts in the country. If it were the Boston area or Seattle that needed this particular type of bill and not his district, my guess is he would not be voting for it. He would simply stick it out with Republicans. Peter King is normally no friend of the left or of the Democratic Party. And this is one, it's a horrible realization that we have to have. What it takes for some of these people to do something, to do the right thing, is to be personally affected. He needs to be reelected in November, so that's why he has to do this. Now, as far as the bill goes, there are actually some really interesting things in it. This is called the HEROES Act, $3 trillion in total. It stands for the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, HEROES Act. It would pay a company's payroll costs up to $100,000 per employee who has been laid off or furloughed if the business can demonstrate that their revenue has dropped at least 20%. It would add $850 billion in assistance to state and local governments, $200 billion in hazard pay for frontline healthcare workers and other non-essential workers. It would do another round of $1,200 checks to most Americans. It would raise the payment per child from $500 also to $1,200, but it would be capped total at $6,000 per family. It would extend the supplemental, or I guess they're calling it enhanced unemployment from the federal government through January 31st of next year. And one of the most interesting components that's buried in there, which I don't actually think will pass if the bill does pass, is that it will eliminate the $10,000 cap on what's called SALT, state and local taxes, for 2020 and 2021. This is super interesting because one of the ways that the Trump Republican tax reform of 2017 hurt those in states like mostly blue states with higher state income taxes is they limited the state and local tax deduction to $10,000. So if you live in a very high tax state or just a blue state with a reasonable amount of tax, you are limited in what amount of tax you can write off on your federal return to $10,000 total. This goes directly at blue states, and it tends to have no effect in some of these red states that have no state income tax. So it would repeal that for 2020 and 2021, which is very, very interesting, although analysts agree it is very unlikely that that suspension of the $10,000 SALT cap would actually make it into a final bill that passes Senate and House conference. But in the meantime, we will see how the House votes. Peter King apparently will be voting with Democrats, and we will follow it. We suspected this was coming, the palpable conflict between what Donald Trump has been saying and what Dr. Fauci, the top infectious disease doctor in the country, has been saying the conflicts have been obvious for months. And yet they danced around the differences until now. Everything that has happened to Dr. Anthony Fauci has been absolutely embarrassing for what it says about our country. Coronavirus protesters chanting "Fire Fauci" at their protests. Conspiracy theories about Dr. Fauci, including bogus videos about coronavirus that target him as a bad actor. Senator Rand Paul attacking him earlier this week, scolding him, saying, "You're not the be all end all." And now Donald Trump seemingly seeing the door open to start more directly going after Dr. Fauci, has publicly broken with Fauci and saying that Dr. Fauci's claims earlier this week during the Senate hearing about, we may not be able to open schools in the fall. Trump is now calling that unacceptable. And what Trump means really is that it's politically unacceptable, and I'll explain why in a moment. Let's take a look at what Donald Trump said.
Dr. Fauci is playing both sides. Are you suggesting that the advice
Well,
he's giving to you is
I was surprised by his answer, actually, because, it's just, to me, it's not an acceptable answer, especially when it comes to schools. The only thing that would be acceptable, as I said, is professors, teachers, etc., over a certain age. I think they ought to take it easy for another few weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, who knows, whatever it may be. But I think they have to be careful because this is a disease that attacks age and it attacks health. And if you have a heart problem, if you have diabetes, if you're a certain age, it's certainly much more dangerous. But with the young children, and students, it's just take a look at the statistics. It's pretty amazing.
Notice that Trump doesn't present any counterfactual. Trump just says Fauci's answer is unacceptable. And that doesn't mean it is scientifically unacceptable. It doesn't mean that it is medically unacceptable. What Trump means is it's politically unacceptable because if there's no school in September, it's probably not good for Trump's reelection in November. If there's no school in September, that signals likely economic calamity continuing to such a degree that it's going to hurt Donald Trump in November. Trump also throws in there, by the way, kids are mostly fine and not affected by the virus. We've already covered that. Children, number one, can spread the virus hugely, even if they don't get significantly sick. They can bring it to all of their homes from school. Then their parents get it. Then their parents can't go to work. Then their parents can't earn money. You understand the problem of this. And we are also, by the way, seeing a Kawasaki-like disease in kids with coronavirus that still needs more investigation. There's been several dozen cases so far. We really don't know that much about it so far. Now, what this conflict means in terms of Dr. Fauci's future, I don't know. One thing that I like in terms of breaking from Trump is Mitt Romney. We've been watching Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney has started regularly ribbing Trump. During the Senate hearing earlier this week, Romney actually asked Dr. Fauci, Donald Trump has been saying Obama is to blame for the fact that we don't have a coronavirus vaccine right now. That's ridiculous, of course. And he offered Dr. Fauci the opportunity to answer. And of course, Dr. Fauci confirmed, no, not having a vaccine right now has nothing to do with Obama. It also has nothing to do with Trump. And I want to talk about that in a moment.
On a separate topic, my impression is that with regards to vaccines, where I'm critical of what we've done on testing on vaccines, we've done a pretty darn good job of moving ahead pretty aggressively. And yet the president said the other day that President Obama is responsible for our lack of a vaccine. Dr. Fauci, is President Obama or by extension President Trump, did they do something that made the likelihood of creating a vaccine less likely? Are either President Trump or President Obama responsible for the fact that we don't have a vaccine now or in delaying it in some way?
No, Senator, not at all. Certainly President Obama nor President Trump are responsible for our not having a vaccine. We moved, as you said, because I described it in my opening statement, rather rapidly. No one has ever gone.
So listen, I like what Mitt Romney is doing. I'm not rehabilitating Mitt Romney's image. I'm not doing any of that stuff. But seriously, who can deny that we would be better off right now in this crisis with Mitt Romney as president rather than Donald Trump? But to the other point that I want to make, when we talk about we don't have a vaccine right now, and that's not Obama's fault, obviously, and it's also not Trump's fault, I want to make really clear that you need to be prepared for a new line of disinformation. that's going to start relatively soon. Donald Trump is going to take credit for a vaccine when there is one. Donald Trump is going to take credit for treatments as we find more effective treatments. And it has nothing to do with him. Understand that it has absolutely nothing to do with him. We eventually are going to find a vaccine, and eventually people are going to get vaccinated, and eventually the pandemic will end. In the same way that on yesterday's show, I outlined for you how no matter what the death toll is, Trump will say, thanks to me, it wasn't 2.2 million, whether it was going to be 60,000 or 100,000 or 160,000 or whatever the number is. Trump will always take credit for it, when in fact, Trump's responsibility is that it's going to be worse than it had to be because of his slow action. When it comes to vaccinations and treatments, they have nothing to do with Trump, but he will eventually take credit for those as well. Depending on when we get those things, he will use them to justify his reelection in November. And he has nothing to do with why we don't have a vaccine right now. And he will have nothing to do with us eventually having a vaccine. Never mind that the vaccine that ends up being widespread in use in the United States may actually be developed by a different country altogether. Don't forget that stuff. This is part of the disinformation propaganda that they are using, which is deflect on any of the blame. Oh, listen, PPE, the problem was Obama and governors, but we solved it by, after 2.5 months, finding PPE for people. Ventilators, oh yeah, the problem was New York didn't buy a whole bunch of them 2 years ago and this and that. The fact that we were slow with the national stockpile, that doesn't figure in anywhere. And much the same way, Trump will get credit for the death toll not being as high as it hypothetically could have been. Trump will try to take credit, rather. And it's up to us to remember the death toll is higher than it needed to be. Look at South Korea, got their first case within hours of the United States getting its first case. Don't let them gaslight you. Remember, I'm on Twitter at @DPacman, and I love hearing from you. Let me know what you think.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's say thank you to a couple of new David Pakman Show members. Today, those great people are Joanne Rowenzon and Lance Dorr. Joanne and Lance, thank you so much for your support. This is a program mostly funded by you. If you want to support the program, you can do so in mere seconds at joinpakman.com. Also, a huge extra special thank you to Greg Doan. Greg has been a member for almost 5 years and is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Greg Doan, thank you so much. Grab a membership. It's quick, it's easy, and it feels good at joinpakman.com. All right, let's go to the phones and see what is on people's minds at 617-830-4750. Starting today with our caller from the 216 area code. Caller from 216, what's your name? Where are you calling from today?
Hi, David. I'm Connor. I'm calling from Cleveland.
Hey, Connor, what's up?
So I was listening to a Facebook live stream from Heather Cox Richardson, a professor at Boston College.
Right.
And she proposed something.
Oh, boy. Connor, you're breaking up, my friend. She proposed what? You're breaking up.
She proposed, how did McConnell know that Hillary wasn't going to win when he blocked the nomination of Merrick Garland?
Right.
How did he know that Hillary wasn't going to win? Is it just luck, or did he know something?
No, I don't. I mean, listen, it's a gamble, right? I mean, you might block it or you might not. If your guy gets in, then Trump picks the replacement. It's not a guarantee. I mean, is the idea that it implies some kind of rigged election or something like that?
That seemed to be her thought. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, I haven't heard what she said, but if you say if you block this for a year, you might give the pick to a Republican, and if not, listen, you still delayed it, and okay, Hillary gets to pick, but you at least had a shot at it. It doesn't, to me, say that something conspiratorial necessarily happened.
Interesting. So the chances are that Biden would go ahead and nominate Garland if he gets the chance.
I have absolutely no idea. I don't know that Merrick Garland. I mean, that was years ago. I've no clue. There's so many people that could be chosen from. I've not heard anything about Biden and Merrick Garland.
Yeah. Well.
All right, Connor, thank you very much. I appreciate the call. Certainly something to think about. Let's go next to our caller from the 510 area code. Who's calling today from 510?
Hey, David. This is Arash from California.
Hey, Arash, what's up?
Yeah, so I kind of have a two-part question.
Okay.
Firstly, from my general understanding, when it comes to economic development in third world countries, some of the main contributing factors are for growth are things like education, the infusion of foreign capital, the transference of soft skills and foreign technology. With that in mind, do you think that policies involving forced technology transfer, that is the practice in which a domestic government requires foreign businesses to share their tech/soft skills in exchange for market access, is that a desirable thing for developing countries with a large market, right? And this is the second part now. If it is a good thing, do you think that the rise of multilateral trade agreements, which gives stronger protections against FTT through the enforcement of intellectual property rights and the ability to bring nations to court for investor-state dispute settlement, hurt the ability of those countries to engage in FTT?
The answer to all of those questions is it depends, and it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And to be clear, I'm not picking on you here when I say this, Arash, but that's the exact type of question where if you're looking for a yes or no answer, you're essentially thinking about this the wrong way, because the answers to those questions would depend on what types of technologies are we talking about? Which countries are we talking about? What are the underlying industries and employment circumstances of those countries? What currency is the prevailing reserve currency in those countries, and how does that relate to the country in which the businesses they're looking to buy operate? There's no possible way that I could say yes, that's good, and no, it's not a concern about the arbitration. It's such a huge issue. I don't see any simple answer to it.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking it from the perspective of one of the arguments in favor of, for example, tariffs, right?
Yep.
Is the infant industry argument, right? So could there be specific sectors, for example, high skilled sectors like telecommunications or biotechnology and stuff like that, in which you could help facilitate the development of these specific industries through the FTT. That's what I was thinking.
Of course, that's certainly possible, but it's not guaranteed. And that's why this is you just have to deal with really specific examples. Multilateral trade deals. Trump increasingly is talking about bilateral trade deals as opposed to multilateral. And a lot of his followers are just yeah, Trump says it's good, so that must be good. It must be good because Trump, the big boy, can negotiate directly or whatever. For me, there's no hard and fast rule about, depending on which countries we're talking about, depending on the scope of a particular trade deal, multilateral may be more logical or it may not be. When looking at the supply chains, for example, if you are in a country where your supply chain for the areas that you're looking to do a trade deal around are heavily dependent on 5 other countries, and you want to do a bilateral trade deal with only one of those countries, that's a recipe ripe for creating new problems. So maybe a multilateral deal is more appropriate there. In other cases where there is a more direct competition and it's more an issue of specialization between 2 countries, maybe in that case, it's the bilateral trade deal that you need. My point is, everybody claiming to have the definitive answer on a lot of this stuff is not looking at specific examples typically.
Okay. Well, it's good talking to you, David. Nice calling in for the show. I appreciate the answer.
All right. Appreciate the phone call, Arash. Thank you. Hope to speak to you soon. Let's see. Where are we going next? Let's go to the 416 area code. Who's calling today from 416?
Hello?
Yes, that's you. Yes, it is.
Oh, that's very nice. Hi, David. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm calling from Toronto, Canada.
Love it.
Great show. Love it. Watch it every day. I just have a quick question about masks. Medical, can you give me a brief description, what kind of masks are there? What masks should I wear or shouldn't? Maybe because some people say I should wear them at all times. Some people say they're useless.
Right.
Maybe you know something they don't.
Okay, I don't know anything other than what the health experts say. I want to make that clear. So here's this is a good opportunity to talk about masks. Couple different things. Number one, when you talk about masks, there's a big difference between a scarf, a fabric mask, a surgical mask, and an N95 mask. The N95 mask ordinarily is going to provide the largest amount of protection, both in terms of releasing your fluids out of nose and mouth and allowing other fluids in. Now, there are these masks I've seen around which have a valve on them. A lot of those are one-way valves where if you breathe or sneeze, stuff comes out, but it protects things coming in. Those are not the ones, as I understand, that people should be wearing right now because they're not keeping things in. So that's number one. Number two, there's this debate over, are the surgical masks and the scarves and the fabric masks effective or not effective, and to what degree are they effective? What we know is, regardless of the type of mask, if you have two people next to each other, if neither is wearing a mask and one person coughs, versus if one person is wearing a mask, versus if both are wearing a mask, regardless of the type of mask, the risk of transmission is lower if both people are wearing the mask. Now, if they're crappy masks, the attenuation is going to be moderate, but it'll still add up. If both people, you'll reduce the chance of transmission. So in terms of what kind of mask, listen, the most effective is an N95. You can get the KN95, which is, it's a Chinese-made, supposedly up to the same standard mask. There's debate over whether individuals should really be getting N95s because you are potentially taking them away from a healthcare worker. Without stepping into the supply piece, what I'm doing is, anytime I go indoors somewhere, I'm wearing a mask. From what I've seen Dr. Fauci and others say, the outdoor contagion, unless you're crowded at, a hiking trail, is almost none. Like the vast majority of the contagion is happening within people's own households. Then it's happening at people's workplaces. It's happening in healthcare settings. But the outdoor contagion, some articles floated around about, you could jog past someone and you could cough right as they breathe in and then they've got the virus. There is essentially no evidence I've seen that is going on. So when I am just walking around, I am not wearing a mask at this point in time.
Okay, and you said you wear a mask indoors. Is it surgical or is it you made it on your own?
Actually, a viewer who makes them and sells them sent me a couple, and it's a fabric mask.
It's a fabric mask. Okay,
Yes,
I see. I'm just working in a place where, I have a few customers coming by once in a while, so I'm it's very hard to get masks in Toronto, and I don't want to take them away from medical workers if they need them.
Yeah, at this point, though, it should be pretty easy to get the surgical masks, not N95s. You can get, my understanding is, from what I've seen, I don't know Amazon Canada, but in the U.S., you can get a 50-pack of surgical masks for like $30.
Yeah, but I remember a few weeks ago it was $150, not... So
right.
It was 5 times. So
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, David.
All right, my friend, thank you. Great to hear from you in Toronto. Very much appreciate it. Let's go next to our caller from the 631 area code. Who's calling today from 631?
Hi, David. Is this me?
Yes, it is.
Hi. This is Spinny Chair from Long Island. And
thanks, Vinny. Before you go on, if you can put the phone a little further from your mouth because you're absolutely maxing out our system and it becomes hard to hear, just keep the phone a little further away from your mouth, please.
All right, I'm going to try it from here.
Oh,
so
that's beautiful.
Other day,
I love it.
The other day you had a video about social democracy and populism that I found very interesting, but I thought there was more to flesh out because you yourself, you do have an anti-establishment criticism. You will criticize what you call the Democratic establishment, and I think that to an extent is populism. So I don't know if you can kind of square that circle, because you do engage in some populist arguments, but you do manage not to, I guess, fall off the deep end with it.
I mean, I guess I don't, there's really no conflict between, so the analysis was basically an analysis of, it's harder to pervert and bamboozle with social democracy than with populism. That was my assertion, essentially. And as I said in the video, that doesn't mean left populist ideas are wrong. So the way that I square it is, I believe in socially democratic policy, and certainly there are good left populist ideas, and I have some of those ideas. But the analysis was that it's very easy to pervert populism, and you end up with right populism, and it can even go into authoritarianism. That was the analysis. So maybe I'm not understanding the question, but I don't know that there's anything to square.
Oh, so in other words, you wouldn't say that you have a somewhat populist analysis, but that you don't go off the edge with it, like maybe a moderate populism. You would just say that you're just a social democrat.
Listen, we're getting into sort of like labeling everything. I guess my general political views, economic views, are of social democracy. There is certainly overlap in terms of many of the goals with left populism, but the story was not so much about my views per se, but about the ways in which populist rhetoric has been perverted in many cases and ends up being something very different than what's promised.
Okay, well, maybe if I could phrase it in a different way. I just lost my train of thought. I'll head out now. Have a good day, David.
All right, very good. Appreciate the phone call. Great to hear from you. Yeah, so we have dramatically improved our phone system over the last 2 weeks, where we have a very small delay, as people can probably tell. The only downside is I have less of an ability when that crunching sound happens. It's in the system. It's not on my end. So people need to talk a little quieter and maybe keep the phone a little further away. Both very, very important elements of making a good phone call right now. Let's go to our caller from the 708 area code. Caller from 708, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Dave. My name is Glenn, calling from St. Louis. How you doing?
Good. What's up, Glenn?
I'm just wondering, you stated that you think that the United States is doing the worst on the coronavirus situation. I'm wondering if you still think on that, even though a lot of European countries have a higher death rate, and I know we're on per capita not doing as great testing volume, but we are doing better than France, I believe. And when you put that statement out, I was kind of confused how you would actually think the U.S. would be worse than China, when China was the one who let it spread and kind of lied to the World Health Organization. If you want to go into how to extent it, they lied, but kind of seemed like they probably would have the worst handling out of any country.
Okay, Glenn, I got you. Please try to keep the phone a little further from your mouth, because you are clipping. So there's a lot of different stuff there that you mentioned. So let's step back for a little bit. One thing is, if you're referring to my tweet, I actually said, we don't know the truth about the situation in China, so it's hard to compare our response to China's response, because clearly China has not been honest about it. So I made that caveat. So I don't think it's necessary.
So wouldn't you say that they have kind of been the worst, and if we know they're not being true about it then, and that it's spread from there?
I don't know what the truth is of the Chinese response, because we just don't know. They're certainly being dishonest, that we can say. I don't know exactly how bad their response has been. In terms of other countries, it's becoming very clear that Russia and Brazil are doing very, very poorly. They seem to have benefited early from the fact that it came first to the US, but Russia and Brazil's curves are disastrous. So by the time what's difficult about this is the outbreak started at different times. So we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. But Brazil and Russia, by the time it's all said and done, may certainly be up there. But one of the things we can start to look at is the duration of the curve before you start seeing dramatic decreases in cases and deaths. And certainly when you look at places like Spain and Italy, I mean, South Korea at the very top of the list, Taiwan, These are places that sometimes in a matter of 10 or 14 days reversed the curve. Whereas we are now going on, multiple months. There are states that are now having huge growth rates like Texas and others. So, I'm not saying the U.S. response has been the worst. It's certainly been of the worst.
I still a little disagree with that. I was still wondering if you see. It seemed like when I saw some of your tweets, some of your shows, you're saying it was the worst.
It's one of the worst, and I would certainly be curious about what country we can definitively say was worse. Iran may have been worse, for example. China may have been worse.
We're doing better testing per capita and better death rate than France.
Okay, so we're right now we're 40th in testing per capita. So we can certainly find countries and say we're better on this metric than that country. That we can certainly do, but I don't know what that gets us necessarily. I mean,
no, I guess I'm just saying, like, what metric? You said you're just looking at the metric of rising rates of what's doing better.
There's a whole bunch of different stuff that you would look at. And Glenn, I'm really going to need you to keep the phone further from your mouth because the sound is really causing a problem. So we look at a lot of different things. We look at how long after the first case did testing get up to a certain level per capita. We were terrible on that. We look at death rate. Our death rate is the 12th or 13th highest in the world. You look at testing per capita, we're 40th in the world. All right, so there's a whole bunch of different stuff that we look at. There's not just one metric, okay?
All right, no, I agree with you. There's more than one metric. I guess I would say, and if you combine all the metrics, from the numbers, I'd say we're in the middle, but I think it's also hard to compare country to country because not every country is basically the same.
Well, our death rate is in the top 7% of countries. Out of 180 countries, we're like 12th or 13th. That seems pretty bad to me. Glenn, I appreciate the phone call. I've got to run. We are going to take a quick break. If you are holding, don't hang up because I will go right back to the phones after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back. We are going to go right back to the phones at 617-830-4750 and see what is on people's minds. Let's go to our caller from the 815 area code. Who's calling today from 815?
Hi, is that me?
Yes, it is.
Hi. All right. So I kind of have a two-part question here.
Okay.
You're no doubt familiar with basically how the alt-right pipeline worked a few years ago. Like, I've even seen you do videos on it.
Yep.
Do you think something similar is happening in the opposite direction? And I don't mean like the conservative idea of anything even remotely progressive or socialist, but I mean, do you think there is now currently a similar pipeline that is turning people into actual socialists, actual communists?
Well, the thing about calling it a pipeline, so listen, there are people that go into and come out of a political ideology all the time. There are people that become alt-right and people that stop being alt-right. There are people that become socialists and who stop being socialist, etc. That's normal. The question about calling it a pipeline, to me, is more one about, is there a particular path that we can identify that is either happening through like proactive propaganda movements or indoctrination movements, disinformation, or simply like algorithms online? I'm open to the idea that there is something similar going on with socialism. I'm just not aware of it. Certainly there's socialist voices on websites like YouTube and Reddit and Twitter, and you can certainly create an echo chamber for yourself of socialist voices. Whether there's a pipeline per se, I guess I don't have enough information to say. Like, what do you have in mind? What do you identify as that pipeline?
Well, the biggest pieces of evidence of this, in my opinion, are the rise of a lot of popular, overtly socialist content online. Like, there's tons of socialist YouTubers out there with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of subs. It's basically just blowing up online. And the second part of this question would be, do you think this is a good or bad thing for the left in America?
Well, there's two that it depends. So I am not a socialist. So if the question is, do I think the Democratic Party needs to start running on socialism? My personal answer is no, but that's not happening. If the question is, are we better off if more people are exposed to the ideas of socialism and understand them for what they are rather than the cartoonified things that the right likes to say? I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'd say that's more my question.
Okay, yeah. No, I took Marxian economics at the University of Massachusetts as an undergraduate. My professors there were Richard Wolff, the socialist economist, and the late Steve Resnick. And it was one of the few schools that was actually offering, as part of their economics department, serious classes on Marxian economics. And I'm better for it. It didn't turn me into a socialist, but I now understand some about those ideas. I think that's great.
Can I just clarify something real quick? I'm not inherently opposed to socialism.
Okay.
But I think the spreading of these socialist ideas online is causing a lot of people on the left to act in ways that are kind of counterproductive. Like, for example, I'm actually in a few socialist discords of a few of the bigger socialist content creators.
Yeah.
And it's a very common narrative there that basically electoralism is dead. There's no point in participating in this election. The only way we're going to get real change is if we take direct action outside of the system. Don't bother voting for Biden. It won't matter. We need to
let me address that. So here's the thing. Every movement is going to create some very loud people who will turn what you're describing as accelerationist. It's basically like working within the system no longer works. You need to destroy the system. That's not unique to socialism, right? I mean, the Tea Party extremists also had a component of accelerationist stuff about ways in which society needs to be broken down and sort of like rebuilt. White supremacists fundamentally are talking about, significantly accelerationist ideas in many. I think it would be unfair to say that that's unique to socialism. There are certainly people who start following socialist theory, learning about it, and they end up in the position what you're talking about. That's not most of them, and I don't think that is we could say that that's unique to socialism.
So you don't think it's like something we should be particularly worried about then?
I don't think we need to be more worried about extremist socialists than we need to be worried about extremist libertarians or whatever. I think that at the extremes of most movements, you will find people whose ideas are very unlikely to ever really be mainstreamed, and to put too much emphasis on them probably doesn't make sense. Listen, I appreciate the call. I do want to move on because I've got some other people that want to get on here, but very important topics for sure. Let's go to our caller from the 678 area code. Who's calling today from 678? 678. Hey, how are you? Who's this?
This is Max from Tulsa.
Hey, Max, what's up?
Hey, I was just wondering what your thoughts were on seemingly Republican states, red states are opening up rather fast. And it seems like the media and just the general population of the country, even if case rates are going up and death rates are going up, it doesn't really seem to hit home with a lot of people, if you don't lose a loved one or something like that. So even if case rates do keep spiking and going up, and as states continue to open, do you see down the line in the November election, if we have it on time, maybe Trump gaining ground and gaining approval with his denial of that there's actually a problem, and maybe red states will be flourishing a little bit more? And if we keep it under, if we keep hospitals from capsizing over their limits.
Yeah,
Just
good.
holding on
Okay,
for dear
very, very good question. So there's two ways that this could go. Now, let me make it clear. I would love it. I would genuinely love it if all of these red states that open up don't see a resurgence. I would love to see that it doesn't happen and that things just go great and then blue states can open up and then everything's lovely and then we go and hopefully we remove Donald Trump in November anyway. But your question is a good one, which is if the numbers do keep getting worse in these red states, and it's already happening to some degree, it's happening in Texas, it's happening in Georgia, Tennessee is increasingly a disaster, et cetera. I think in the short term, Trump's strategy will work, which is normalize it, pretend everything's fine. Okay, I mean, yeah, some people are dying, but this is the new norm. It's status quo. I think it'll work for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. But when it continues, and then you also get the disastrous second quarter GDP numbers in August, I don't think it's going to work for Donald Trump to just keep insisting everything's fine. I don't. I think it's a short-term play. If by chance there are no resurgences from opening, I'll be happy because I don't want there to be, but it will work out for Trump to some degree. Otherwise, I think it eventually will completely backfire on him.
Yeah, I don't see how it won't. I guess if hospitals do end up keeping it under, the limit to where, they're at least functioning.
Yeah.
I guess we could, but yeah.
All right, my friend.
Well,
Very good. I appreciate the phone call. Thank you so much. Let me go next to our caller from the 303 area code. Who's calling today from 303? 303. I just heard a pop. I think you're there. Interesting. All right. I think 303 is gone. Let's go instead to our caller from the 972 area code. Who's calling from 972?
Hi, David. It's Daniel from Texas. How are
Hey,
you
Daniel.
today?
What's going on?
I have a question for you. So I'm a big advocate of Medicare for All, like many of your listeners and yourself. One of the questions that come up from my friends and family is, should it be included in a Medicare for All option or whatever plan that we come up with, that we are including all of the insurance employees as part of retraining or even bringing them onto a government-ran system? Or should it be included in the budgeting for that? Or how would you picture that, the Democratic Party, since they'll be the ones that wind up pushing it through, how do you plan that they will do it versus how do you think it should be done to incorporate all those people who lose their jobs?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of the people that work in the health insurance industry don't really need to be retrained. They're going to need to find new jobs for sure, but it's not really the training piece that they need help with. What I mean by that is, so everyone who's a service provider would just continue. Like if you're a doctor, you stay a doctor. If you're a nurse, you stay a nurse. Okay. Executive level people, human resources people, all of these people that work at health insurance companies, their skills would still be in demand as is at other companies. We would just need to find other companies for them. So certainly that would be a piece of it. There's really only a slice of healthcare company employees that would really need retraining. I mean, okay, maybe you don't need nearly as many medical billing people, and that's a really specific, narrow job that would be less relevant. You'll still need some of them because remember, single payer still involves billing. It's just that there's one payer. So I actually don't know that retraining is really the thing. I think it's going to be more a jobs program to figure out where are they going to go. Do they get involved in government infrastructure programs? Do we transition them over to green energy stuff? Like that is a question. I don't know that retraining is really the issue.
I agree, and I agree with that. I just kind of wanted to set the stage there for your thoughts on it. And do you think that the numbers should be included in any budgets when we have debates or discussions about that regarding the cost of that, or do you see it already shown in those numbers?
I don't know the answer as to whether it's already in the numbers. I just simply don't know.
Got it.
My belief, because I want to be transparent, is if we think about what it's going to cost to do Medicare for All, I want to include in that whatever costs we are including to transition a lot of the people that will lose their jobs over to new. I would include that. Now, Republicans in bad faith would simply say, oh, so it costs even more than you said, right? I mean, so for political reasons, maybe it's best not to include it. But if I really want to holistically think about what's the total cost here, I would include the transition costs for how the government will support healthcare company employees moving elsewhere.
Great. Thank you. Have a good one. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Okay. I don't have time to take more calls today, but I will take calls again. And I really appreciate everybody who called in. Hope to hear from you very, very soon.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Whether you're looking for David Pakman Show coffee for your Chemex or French press or a David Pakman Show t-shirt, it's all available on our website, shipping to anywhere in the world at davidpakman.com/gear. Don't miss the bumper stickers too. davidpakman.com/gear.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. Very relevant and prescient questions today. The first is, hey, David, could so-called rhinos be better allies for removing Trump than the Never Biden people in November of 2020? Rhinos are Republicans in name only. Okay, I think that thinking that is sort of defeatist, and I'm going to tell you why. There is no doubt that there is a Republican movement that hates Trump and wants to remove him. This includes people like George Conway, the husband of Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway. This includes people like, there's Steve Schmidt is an advisor, and Rick Wilson, who I've interviewed on the show. These are Republican strategist types who don't like Trump and want to see him removed. Now, the question about allies could be interpreted two ways. Number one is just like in the sheer numbers of it, do I think there will be more Republicans who abandon Trump and vote Biden than the number of Never Biden people who would normally be Democratic voters but are going to either not vote or vote third party or vote for Donald Trump? I think the answer is no. I mean, listen, every election there is abandonment. If you look at 2008, there were a bunch of people who voted for Hillary in the Democratic primary and then voted for John McCain. In 2016, you saw some Bernie primary voters who abandoned Hillary, abandoned the party, so to speak, and voted for Trump. It was actually a smaller number than the number that did the abandonment in 2008 and went to McCain. Every election you have that. I don't think the number is actually going to be that big. And I know that the Never Biden movement is very, very loud online. But you have to understand that there's a lot of things that are very, very loud online. And it turns out that they don't really reflect reality as closely as we might imagine or we might even hope. The Bernie run is an example of that. So much online activity. And then Bernie lost 3 consecutive Super Tuesdays. Only the last of, by that I mean the 3 Tuesdays in March that have a bunch of elections. Only the last one was even moderately affected by the coronavirus, and there's no particular reason to believe that that actually hurt Bernie more than it hurt Biden. So I don't actually think that the Never Biden movement is going to be what prevents Biden from winning. I think that there is no question, though, that we should welcome Republicans who are not going to vote Trump. Once Trump's out, whoever the next president is, either Biden in winning in November or some other Democrat winning 4 years from now, at some point, those Republicans are going to be back to disagreeing with us on most policy, and that's it. So the idea of them being allies, anybody who doesn't vote for Trump votes for Biden, right? Any one of those votes helps remove Donald Trump, and we'll take it, and we love it, and it's all fantastic. The more people that realize that this guy is a lethal menace, the better and more efficiently that we can remove him. But I worry about the hostility of saying, man, some of these Republicans are better allies than the Never Biden people. It's not one or the other. We need everybody. And there are reasons why people might be Republicans and not want Trump that would be completely unaligned with our values. He might be not really a small government conservative. They hate that he did the stimulus. Like there's people that are mad at Trump on the right because he did the coronavirus stimulus. Coronavirus stimulus wasn't big enough. I mean, okay, if they don't want to vote Trump in November because of it, and they're going to help Biden win by 1 vote each, I'll take it. But the reason they disagree with Trump might be completely not in line with our values. So everybody's an ally who helps remove Trump. But the idea that we want to start shaming Never Biden people by saying these rhinos are even better allies for us, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's pragmatic. I don't think it's based in the facts either. Hey, David, whatever happened to Donald Trump's wall? And does it matter for 2020? So all you need to know is that Trump is claiming he did it. Trump is claiming he did it. Now, you might remember when he was running, Trump's promise was by the end of my first term, we'll have a wall across the entire U.S.-Mexico border. That was never going to happen. Trump also said Mexico would pay for it. That was never going to happen. And none of it has happened. Trump has been able to finagle getting about, looks like 150, 160 miles of wall starting to be built, some of which will be completed by November. But what you need to understand is despite that obviously being a failure by Donald Trump to do what he promised to do, he's going to claim victory and a lot of his followers are going to fall for it. So first of all, there will be very little fact checking of Trump about you promised a wall across the entire border. What the hell happened? If it happens, Trump will say, listen, Democrats got in the way, coronavirus got in the way, and I built what I was able to do. If it weren't for Democrats, I would have built the whole thing, but we've had a huge success. We have 150 miles built or whatever, and I did everything I could, and it is a victory. We have more miles now than we ever had before. Blah, 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 blah. You all get it, right? So he's going to claim victory no matter what, and that is all that matters. Optics is all that matters. It is this bizarre sort of like Rorschach test of a wedge issue. I had people calling me on live calls a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. There's this crazy a Republican caller, Doug, who sometimes calls in. He's from Southern California. And he was saying the wall. And I said, well, if Trump doesn't build the wall during his first term, will you still vote for him for re-election? And he basically said probably, which means that it doesn't really matter if he builds the wall. Even just claiming to have succeeded, despite the oppression of Democrats on the wall, most Trumpists are going to vote for him anyway because they see Biden as worse. It's an incoherent explanation that coronavirus and Democrats prevented him from building it. Republicans have also gotten in the way of giving him the funding that he wants. We've talked about all of that, but the 2020 election is going to be primarily a referendum on the state of the economy at the time and what that means about Trump's management of the country. Of course, it'll be affected by coronavirus, but Trump's actual handling of the virus itself is mostly baked in already. It will be a matter of, do we have a sort of ebb between the waves that helps Trump in November or not? I don't believe that the wall is going to be a factor in any way. People who are against the wall are probably already not voting for Trump. People who voted for Trump in 2016 and hear him say, we did it, I made 150 miles and we'll do more my second term, they're going to fall for it. I do not believe it's going to make a difference. If you disagree with me, I, of course, want to hear from you. Hey, David, whatever happened to the Blue Lives Matter movement? It's interesting because in the context of the Reopen the Country protests, all of a sudden, all of these right-wingers who were from the Blue Lives Matter movement are putting cops' lives at risk, attacking them, criticizing them, and saying that they are the forces of government tyranny. Are they just hypocrites or what's going on? Yeah, beautifully pointed out. So when the Black Lives Matter movement got going, an alternative movement or an alternative hashtag got going called Blue Lives Matter, meaning, okay, Black Lives Matter, meaning the lives of Black people killed by police, but Blue Lives Matter, our police lives matter. And we need to understand, this is their perspective, that a lot of these Black people were killed by police because police were in danger. And that's why Blue Lives Matter. So it's a right-wing movement that wants to minimize the issue of police violence against Black Americans and do it by propping up law enforcement. Now, you've seen a reversal. Now that you've seen governors in many states say we've got to stay home, businesses should close, etc. Now that you've seen police enforcing, hey, this park is closed, you're trespassing, you've got to go. You've seen police enforcing different elements of these stay-at-home and distancing guidelines. You have seen those who say respect authority from the right say, oh, well, now you've got to disrespect authority. You are seeing those who say, respect the police. The police are the ones that are here telling us how we should behave. Let's behave in a way that doesn't get them angry with us. They are now antagonizing and harassing and intimidating police who are guarding state houses, for example. They're just hypocrites. That's all it is. Listen, this is debt and deficit is a political football. They don't really care about debt and deficit on the right. They just use it when they can to justify removing a Democrat and voting for a Republican, or when they want to prop up a Republican, they say, look, they've cut the deficit, even if it's not true, like we're seeing under Donald Trump. Just a political football. Small government. Small government is, for many people, there are principled libertarians, sure, but for a lot of these right-wingers, small government is a political football. It is something to say, but then all of a sudden they want bailouts for this industry and bailouts for these people and, buy food from farmers and redistribute it to people and stuff that is completely antithetical to their worldview. They'll always come up with some way to rationalize it away, but they immediately abandon their principles as soon as the situation on the ground changes. And it's much the same here, guys. There's no unique respect of law enforcement or authority from those who say it's all about law and order. It's all about law and order when they want to justify the targeting of minority neighborhoods by law enforcement, right? Hey, look, we're law and order. You go where the crime is, blah, 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 blah. But all of a sudden when it's, hey, wait a second, we gotta reopen it. You can see my roots. I need my hair done. I need to go buy fertilizer, manure, as one guy said, whatever. Now the police are the enemies. They are actually the perpetuators of tyranny. And who knew when all of these gun people were saying, we need to be protected from government tyranny? Who knew that meant staying at home and watching Netflix? That's the tyranny that apparently many of them were imagining. So they are hypocrites, but it's not unique is my message. They're hypocrites on a lot of these issues. A lot of these, they stake out policy positions and values that sound good in the absence of reality. And as soon as reality hits, sometimes for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons, they abandon those principles and go to what is it that I want right now because I'm essentially a petulant child like the president. Astutely asked. Glad you brought it up. We've got a tremendous bonus show today. Get instant access to the bonus show. 2 ways. Become a member at joinpacman.com or become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. I'll speak to you then. Otherwise, Monday we'll be back with new program.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.